can't go through here without a badge. Step back.
I'm Dr. Althea Monroe, Chief of Surgery. My first case is already being prepped. I left my badge in my locker. You can look me up.
That's not how it works. No badge, no entry. I don't care what you say you are.
You can call the charge nurse or the OR manager. They'll confirm it in 30
I'm not
seconds.
calling anyone. Rule.
At 6:47 a.m., a hospital hallway camera captured a security officer stepping directly into the path of Dr. Althea Monroe, a 46-year-old black woman and senior surgeon, as she approached a restricted wing at Riverview Medical Center. She was dressed in surgical scrubs beneath a dark coat, her hair pulled back, a surgical cap tucked into her pocket. She identified herself as staff and attempted to continue toward the operating floor, but the officer refused to let her pass. Within minutes, movement in the hallway slowed. Nurses stopped. A supervisor was called. Phones began recording. What started as a routine morning inside a Tacoma hospital would escalate into a documented incident involving ignored credentials, policy violations, and a confrontation that would later force the hospital to answer questions it could not dismiss, ending with a career cut short and a costly resolution no one on scene appeared to anticipate. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The officer on camera was Gavin Rourke, 38 years old, contracted through a private security firm that provided coverage for Riverview Medical Center. He had been assigned to the East Corridor for the early shift, a position that required monitoring badge access to operating rooms and surgical prep areas. According to internal logs, Rourke had worked hospital security for nearly a decade, moving between facilities after short tenures that ended without formal discipline but with repeated complaints marked unsubstantiated. Those complaints, later reviewed, reflected a consistent pattern of racially biased enforcement, particularly toward black staff. Staff who worked mornings recognized his approach. He was rigid about authority, less flexible than other officers, and known for escalating interactions rather than resolving them. More than one nurse had previously described him as quick to assume and slow to listen, though none of those comments had resulted in corrective action. That morning, Rourke stood near the access door with his arms crossed as staff filtered through using ID badges. When Dr. Monroe approached, he watched her closely. She walked with purpose, eyes forward, clearly moving toward the operating wing. Dr. Monroe had worked at Riverview Medical Center for over 15 years. She had completed her residency there, built her career inside those walls, and risen steadily through the ranks based on performance, outcomes, and peer review. By the time of this incident, she oversaw surgical teams, approved operating schedules, and was responsible for decisions that affected patient care daily. None of that would matter in the hallway. Rourke stepped sideways, blocking the doorway. "I need to see your badge," he said. She stopped. "I'm running late. I work back there," she replied, reaching into her coat. "Yeah, right. Badge first," Rourke repeated, holding up a hand. "Guess they're just handing degrees out to anyone." She ignored his racist remark. She glanced down at her watch, then back up. "I don't have it on me. I'm staff." Rourke shook his head. "Everyone who's actually staff has a badge. You can't just walk into a restricted area." This wasn't unusual policy, but what followed would later be reviewed closely. Rather than offering an alternative verification method, something hospital security was trained to do, Rourke remained planted in front of the door. "I need you to step back," he said. The woman didn't raise her voice. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm scheduled in the OR. You can call it in." Rourke didn't. Instead, he keyed his radio. "I've got a black female refusing to show ID attempting access." That phrasing would matter later. A nurse passing by slowed her pace, glancing between them. Another staff member stopped altogether. The hallway, normally a constant flow of motion, began to stall. "This is unnecessary. You're holding me up," the woman said. Rourke responded, "You're the one making it difficult." Dr. Monroe remained composed, but her patience was thinning. "You can verify me in the system. Call administration." Rourke didn't move. "You're not going anywhere until I see ID." Behind them, a nurse whispered, "Is that Dr. Monroe?" Another pulled out a phone. Rourke noticed the attention and straightened. "Everyone keep moving," he said, though no one did. Dr. Monroe crossed her arms. "You're holding a surgical team. This needs to end now." Instead of de-escalating, Rourke called for his supervisor. Within moments, the tension in the corridor had shifted from inconvenience to confrontation. What should have been resolved with a quick verification was becoming something else entirely, and the cameras were still rolling. The supervisor arrived 3 minutes later. Lenora Vance, white woman, 52, stepped out of the stairwell with a tablet under her arm and a radio clipped to her belt. She had been supervising the morning shift for nearly 7 years and was known for keeping situations quiet rather than resolved. As she approached, she took in the scene quickly. Gavin Rourke blocking the access door, a growing cluster of staff in the hallway, and a woman standing calmly with her arms folded. "What's going on?" Vance asked. Rourke spoke first. "She's refusing to show ID and trying to access a restricted area." Dr. Althea Monroe turned toward Vance. "I'm staff. I'm scheduled in the OR. He's refusing to verify me." Vance glanced briefly at Dr. Monroe, then back at Rourke. "Did you ask for her badge?" "Yes," Rourke said. "She doesn't have it." Vance nodded, as if that settled the matter. "Look here, lady, hospital policy requires visible identification in restricted zones." Dr. Monroe exhaled slowly. "Policy also allows verification through the staff system. You can check my name." Vance hesitated. "We still need ID." Behind them, the hallway had grown quieter. A scrub tech stood near the wall pretending to scroll through her phone. A nurse leaned against a cart listening. Someone farther down the corridor had already started recording. "I don't understand why this is continuing," Dr. Monroe said. "You're delaying patient care." Rourke shifted his weight. "You should have thought about that before refusing to cooperate." Dr. Monroe turned back to him. "I'm cooperating. You're choosing not to verify." That distinction would later appear repeatedly in internal reviews. Vance keyed her radio but didn't call administration. Instead, she asked Rourke, "Did she try to force the door?" "No," he said, "but she's being argumentative." Dr. Monroe looked directly at Vance. "I'm asserting that I work here. There's a difference." Vance didn't respond. She glanced at the access door, then back at Rourke. "Hold position," she said. The decision not to verify, not to de-escalate, marked a turning point. Hospital security training manuals later reviewed in this case made clear that officers were expected to resolve access disputes quickly, especially when patient care was involved. Verification through internal systems was standard. Delays were discouraged. None of that happened. Instead, Rourke stepped closer. "I'm asking you one last time to step away from the door." Dr. Monroe didn't move. "You don't have grounds to block me." A nurse nearby spoke up quietly. "She's telling the truth." Rourke ignored her. Another staff member whispered, "This is getting out of hand." Vance noticed the attention and raised her voice. "Everyone needs to move along." No one did. Dr. Monroe glanced down the corridor toward the operating wing. Time mattered. Schedules were tight. Teams were already assembled. Every minute of delay affected more than one person. "You're creating a problem that doesn't need to exist," she said. Rourke responded, "You are creating it by refusing a simple request." The exchange had shifted from policy to posture. Vance finally asked, "What's your name?" "Dr. Monroe," she said. Vance typed briefly on her tablet, then stopped. "I still need to see ID." That moment, a partial check, deliberately abandoned, would later be cited repeatedly. A voice cut through the hallway. "What's going on here?" Marcus Igems, the hospital's chief operations officer, had stepped out of an adjacent corridor. He had been on site for an early meeting and recognized the disruption immediately. Vance turned. "Access issue." Igems looked at Dr. Monroe, then back at Vance. "Why is this happening?" Before Dr. Monroe could answer, Rourke spoke. "She won't show ID." Igems frowned. "That's not how we handle this." The tension shifted again. "I'm scheduled in the OR. They won't verify me." Vance stiffened. "We're just following procedure." Igems looked at the gathering staff, then at the camera mounted in the ceiling. "Procedure requires resolution, not a standoff." Rourke opened his mouth to respond, but James cut him off. "Step back." Rourke hesitated, then moved aside. James turned to Dr. Monroe. "Are you okay?" "I'm delayed, and this didn't need to happen." The hallway exhaled collectively, but the damage had already been done. Phones were still recording, staff had witnessed the exchange, and the decisions made, the refusals, the assumptions, the language used, were now documented. As Dr. Monroe moved past the access door and toward the operating wing, Vance and Rourke remained behind, speaking quietly. Whatever they said wasn't captured clearly, but their body language was tense. This was no longer a misunderstanding, it was an incident, and it wasn't over. By mid-morning, the footage had already been pulled. Hospital security reviewed the hallway camera first, then cross-checked it with audio captured on nearby devices. What began as a single access dispute now existed in multiple formats: fixed cameras, staff cell phones, and internal radio logs. Each version showed the same sequence: the block, the refusal to verify, the escalation. Dr. Althea Monroe did not return to the hallway after entering the operating wing. She completed her scheduled procedures without comment. Those who worked alongside her that morning later noted that she remained focused and professional, but the disruption was not forgotten. Word moved quickly inside the hospital. By mid-noon, senior administrators were asking questions. Marcus Igems convened a closed-door meeting with security leadership, human resources, and legal counsel. The focus was narrow at first: whether policy had been followed, whether any patient care had been compromised, and whether the encounter required mandatory reporting. Security supervisors defended the actions initially. "Badge compliance is non-negotiable," one manager said. Legal pushed back. "Verification is part of compliance," counsel responded. That option wasn't used. The question shifted from what happened to why it happened the way it did. Gavin Rourke was pulled off duty before his shift ended. He was instructed to submit a written statement and surrender his radio and access credentials pending review. Lenora Vance was asked to do the same. Neither was told what consequences might follow. Rourke's statement emphasized procedure. He wrote that the individual refused to cooperate and that he maintained control of the access point. He made no reference to alternative verification methods. Vance's statement was shorter. She cited policy language and deferred responsibility upward. Neither statement mentioned race. Human Resources reviewed prior complaints against Rourke that afternoon. The files were thin individually, but consistent collectively. Similar language appeared more than once: unnecessary escalation, dismissive tone, and selective enforcement. Each complaint had been closed without action. This time, the context was different. Meanwhile, one of the staff videos recorded during the incident was shared outside the hospital. It didn't include the full exchange, but it showed the standoff clearly: Rourke blocking the doorway, Dr. Monroe standing her ground, staff watching. By early evening, the clip was circulating privately among medical professionals in the region. Comments accompanied it. Questions followed. Why wasn't she verified? Why was he allowed to block access? Why does this keep happening? Hospital leadership issued an internal notice before the end of the day, acknowledging an incident involving security and a member of staff, and stating that it was under review. The message avoided names and details. It did not slow the conversation. The next morning, formal interviews began. Dr. Monroe was asked to provide a statement. She did so calmly and factually, walking through the timeline without speculation. She noted when verification was requested and refused. She noted the delay to the operating schedule. She noted the language used over the radio. When asked how the encounter affected her, she answered simply, "It disrupted my work and undermined my authority in front of my colleagues." Rourke's interview was more defensive. He repeated his earlier claims and framed the situation as non-compliance. When asked why he didn't verify Dr. Monroe through the system, he said, "She didn't give me a reason to trust her." That answer was written down. Vance's questioning focused on her decision not to verify after being asked directly. She said she didn't want to undermine her officer in the moment. That explanation raised concerns of its own. By the third day, the review had expanded beyond security. Hospital administrators examined whether the incident reflected broader institutional failure. Training records were pulled. Oversight procedures were examined. Legal counsel began preparing for external scrutiny. Staff reactions hardened. Several nurses submitted written complaints of their own, not about this incident specifically, but about past interactions with Rourke. Others spoke about the message the encounter sent. One staff member wrote, "If it can happen to her, it can happen to anyone." Local media reached out by the end of the week, asking for comment about a video involving hospital security and a senior physician. The hospital declined interviews, but confirmed that an internal investigation was ongoing. Inside Riverview Medical Center, there was no longer any doubt that the situation had escalated beyond control. What began as a blocked doorway had become a matter of record, and the consequences, whatever form they would take, were now unavoidable. The findings were finalized 6 weeks later. By then, the internal investigation had expanded beyond the initial hallway encounter. Independent reviewers examined security protocols, training records, radio transcripts, and prior complaints. They interviewed staff who had been present that morning and others who had interacted with Gavin Rourke in the past. The conclusion was clear and documented in writing. Policy had been violated, discretion had been misused, and bias had influenced decision-making. The report stated that Rourke failed to use required verification procedures, escalated an encounter without cause, and improperly blocked a staff member from accessing a critical work area. It also found that supervisory oversight had failed when Lenora Vance chose to support the escalation rather than resolve it. Race was addressed directly. Investigators cited a pattern of enforcement that disproportionately targeted Black staff members, supported by prior complaints and corroborated by witness statements. The language used during the incident, including radio communications, was described as inaccurate and prejudicial. Within days of the report's release, Gavin Rourke's employment was terminated. His security credentials were revoked, and his contracting firm removed him from all hospital assignments permanently. Lenora Vance was reassigned pending further review and later disciplined for failure to intervene. Riverview Medical Center issued a formal statement acknowledging wrongdoing. It confirmed that the incident involved Dr. Althea Monroe, chief of surgery, and admitted that she had been wrongfully blocked from performing her duties. The hospital announced mandatory retraining for all security staff and implemented new oversight measures, including real-time administrative verification for access disputes. Dr. Monroe did not speak publicly during this period. Instead, she retained outside legal counsel. The civil complaint was filed quietly in Pierce County Superior Court, naming both the hospital and the private security contractor. The lawsuit alleged racial discrimination, false detention, emotional distress, and interference with professional duties. It cited video evidence, internal findings, and witness testimony. It did not ask for reinstatement or apology. It asked for accountability. As discovery began, the hospital moved quickly to negotiate. Emails, internal memos, and prior complaints made the risk of prolonged litigation clear. The case never reached a jury. 3 months after filing, the parties reached a settlement. The amount, $2.5 million. The agreement included financial compensation, policy reforms, and independent monitoring of security practices. While the settlement did not require an admission of liability, the hospital acknowledged that Dr. Monroe's civil rights had been violated. When the settlement became public, the reaction was immediate. Medical associations cited the case as a warning. Civil rights groups pointed to it as an example of how authority, when unchecked, leads to harm. Within the hospital, staff described a noticeable shift in how security interactions were handled. Dr. Monroe returned to her work without ceremony. She continued overseeing surgeries, mentoring residents, and leading her department. When asked later why she pursued the case, she answered briefly, "This wasn't about money. It was about making sure this doesn't happen again." The hallway where the incident occurred looks the same today. The camera still records every movement. Staff still pass through without stopping. But the record remains. A routine morning, a series of choices and consequences that followed because they had to. What do you think should have happened if there were no cameras, no witnesses, and no power to push back? Was justice served here, or does accountability only come when institutions are forced? Share your thoughts below and follow for the next story.